Welcome in, everybody. Ready for a deep dive into the future of HR.
Always ready for that.
We asked you to send in what you're reading, and we got a ton of requests to dig into Lattice's State of People Strategy Report for 2025.
Smart choice. I've been looking at this one too. It's really interesting.
Over 1,250 HR leaders and managers weighed in, so it's a goldmine of perspectives on where things are heading.
Yeah, a real look into what's keeping them up at night, what they're excited about.
Exactly. And one of the things that jumps out is this sense of HR being at a crossroads.
Yeah, like you can feel that tension between all the challenges and opportunities.
Like the report talks about hiring trends being all over the place.
Yeah.
Employee engagement maybe dipping a bit,
Yeah.
and resources being super tight.
It's a tough landscape out there for sure. But what's interesting to me is that even with all that going on, HR leaders are still laser focused on the fundamentals, the core stuff.
It's true. They're not getting distracted by all the shiny new things. It's still about engaging employees, managing performance well, learning and development, and making sure managers have the support they need.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Like, why do those things consistently rise to the top?
It does. I mean, with all the buzz about AI and the future of work, you'd think those priorities might shift.
Right, but they don't. So what's going on there? Maybe it points to a deeper truth about what HR is really all about.
I like that. It's not just about admin tasks. It's about being that strategic partner in the organization.
The person who really understands what makes people tick, how to create a thriving work environment.
And that brings us to AI, right? Because there's this whole narrative out there that AI is going to take over HR.
The robots are coming.
Right. But is that actually happening based on what this report's telling us?
Well, one stat kind of jumped out at me. Only 15% of HR teams said they've actually moved beyond just thinking about AI to actually putting it into practice.
So a lot more talk than action, it seems.
It does seem that way. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Is it just fear of the unknown, or is there something more to it?
I think it's probably a mix of things. Like, the report mentions concerns about the impact of AI,
Right. Will it lead to job losses? Will it create bias? All legitimate questions.
Huge questions. But there's also the practical side of it. A lot of the AI tools out there just aren't user-friendly, especially for what HR needs.
So it's not enough for them to be powerful. They have to be easy to use and actually solve the problems HR is facing.
Exactly. You can't just throw some fancy algorithm at HR and expect it to work magic. And then there's that underlying worry that AI will suck the humanity out of HR.
Oh, yeah. Nobody wants to feel like they're just dealing with a chatbot when it comes to their career or sensitive workplace issues.
Nobody. And it's interesting because the report actually breaks down which AI applications HR people find most useful. And there's a bit of a surprise there.
Oh, really? What is it?
The most popular uses are kind of what you'd expect: writing job descriptions, summarizing information.
Makes sense. Those are pretty easy to automate, right?
Right. But what HR people said they find the most satisfying are AI applications that help identify things like who deserves a pay raise or a promotion.
That's fascinating. It's like they're seeing AI as more than just a taskmaster, but a tool that can actually support talent development.
Almost like this quiet realization that AI can boost the human side of HR, not replace it.
Okay, so how do we get past this gap between the potential and the reality?
The report makes a strong case for investing in AI solutions that are more human-centered.
What does that even mean?
Well, imagine tools that are intuitive, that help HR folks leverage data to make their lives easier.
Give me an example.
Okay, so a tool that can pinpoint skills gaps within a team, or maybe even predict who's thinking about leaving the company.
Whoa, that's powerful stuff.
Right, or even suggest personalized career paths for employees. It could free up so much time for HR to focus on the human stuff.
They could build relationships, create a better work environment, really champion those DEIB initiatives.
All the stuff that truly makes a difference in people's work lives.
Okay, that's exciting. But this report also talks a lot about the HR manager relationship.
It's so crucial, isn't it?
This is a healthy one is actually linked to organizational success.
Makes sense when you think about it.
But what does a healthy relationship even look like in this context? What does it mean in practice?
Well, the report says high-performing HR teams are the ones that really get what their managers need. They give them the tools, the resources, even the training to do their jobs well.
And when managers feel supported.
You see higher engagement, more loyalty to the company, stronger connections within teams.
It makes you think about those teams that aren't doing so well. What's holding them back?
Yeah, there's a big difference between the high-performing and low-performing HR teams.
What's the report say?
Less than half of the low-performing teams were actually able to meet their managers' needs.
So ignoring that HR manager relationship can have some pretty big consequences.
You can't just treat managers like they're an afterthought. They need that support from HR, especially in today's crazy work world.
Right, because if managers are struggling, it's going to impact everyone.
It's a domino effect.
So HR needs to be that strong ally, providing the support and guidance that managers need.
Absolutely. And that means understanding the unique challenges they're facing.
What are those challenges?
Well, everything from managing remote teams to dealing with constant change and uncertainty to creating a culture where everyone feels included and valued.
So HR has a pretty big job on their hands.
They do, but the good news is they don't have to do it alone.
How so?
Well, there are so many resources and tools available to help HR professionals support their managers.
Give me some examples.
Sure, like training programs on things like coaching, giving feedback, having difficult conversations, even managing up.
Those are essential skills for any manager.
Right, and the more we can equip managers with those skills.
The better they'll be able to lead their teams effectively and create a positive work environment.
Exactly. It's about empowering managers, not just telling them what to do.
And that's a big part of building a strong HR manager relationship.
One that's built on trust, respect, and a shared understanding of what it takes to create a thriving organization.
Now, this next topic is a little bit tough, but it's important to talk about it. The report shows a pretty significant decline in the prioritization of DEIB.
Yeah, I noticed that too. A little worrying, to be honest.
Only 15% of the HR team said it was a key focus for 2025. That's a big drop, and it makes you wonder why it's happening.
Especially when we know how crucial DEIB is for building a fair and inclusive workplace.
And the report points to some possible reasons for this decline. Things like limited resources, the difficulty of proving the ROI of DEIB initiatives.
Yeah, those are real challenges that a lot of companies struggle with.
Makes sense, but it's still disheartening. It feels like we're taking a step back when it comes to creating a more inclusive world.
I agree, it shouldn't be an afterthought.
And what's even more striking is the difference between how European companies and U.S. companies view DEIB.
Oh yeah, that was interesting.
European HR leaders are twice as likely to prioritize it compared to their U.S. counterparts.
Quite a gap. Makes you wonder what's going on there, what's driving that difference.
So what's the takeaway here? What can companies do to get that focus back on DEIB, to re-energize their commitment to building a more inclusive workplace?
I think it starts with recognizing that DEIB isn't just a nice to have, it's a must have. It's a business imperative.
Right. Diverse and inclusive workplaces are more innovative, more creative. They're better equipped to connect with a wider range of customers.
And even though measuring the ROI of DEIB can be tough, there's growing evidence that diversity has a real impact on a company's bottom line.
It's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
Absolutely. But it's important to remember that DEIB isn't just HR's responsibility.
It's everyone's responsibility, from the top down.
Exactly. It needs leadership buy-in, a commitment from every level of your organization, and a willingness to make real, systemic changes that create a culture where everyone feels valued and respected.
Now, before we move on, I want to touch on one more thing from this report. It's this disconnect we're seeing around employee engagement.
Yeah, that was interesting.
It's still a top priority for HR, but so many teams are struggling to make any real progress.
It's like they know it's important, but they're not sure how to actually make it happen.
The report says that while almost all HR professionals say their organization values engagement, less than half actually have the resources and support to do anything about it.
It's a big gap between saying you value something and actually doing something about it.
So why is that? Why do you think there's such a disconnect between intention and action when it comes to engagement?
I think part of the problem is that a lot of companies still see engagement as this fluffy, feel-good thing.
Not something that's essential to their success.
Right. They don't realize that engagement isn't just about keeping people happy. It's about creating a workplace where people feel motivated and productive and committed to the company's goals.
It's about tapping into that energy and passion that people have and channeling it in a way that benefits everyone.
When you do that, you see higher productivity, happier customers, less turnover.
So it's a win-win-win situation.
Totally.
Yeah.
So how do we change that narrative? How do we help companies see that engagement is not just a perk, it's a driver of success?
Yeah, how do we get them to move beyond lip service?
Well, I think data is a good place to start. Measure your engagement levels, track your progress over time.
Show them the numbers.
Exactly. And then connect those numbers to business outcomes. Show them how engagement impacts productivity, customer satisfaction, even profitability.
Make the business case for engagement. That makes sense. But what about the softer side of engagement? How do we capture that?
That's where listening comes in. You need to get feedback from your employees directly.
Through surveys, focus groups?
All of that, but also through one-on-one conversations. Find out what motivates them, what challenges they're facing, what they need to feel more connected to their work.
It's about going beyond the data and really understanding what makes your people tick.
Exactly. Once you have that information, you can start making changes that matter.
Like, what? Give me some examples.
It could be anything from redesigning jobs to make them more meaningful, to providing more opportunities for growth and development.
Or even just creating a more supportive and appreciative work environment.
It's about showing your employees that you care about them, that you value their contributions, and that you're invested in their success.
And when employees feel valued, they're more likely to be engaged and committed to their work.
It's a virtuous cycle.
So it seems like creating a truly engaging work environment requires a multifaceted approach.
It does. It's about data and feedback, but it's also about creating a culture where people feel valued and supported.
It's about leadership and communication, about empowering employees and giving them the resources they need to thrive.
And it's about recognizing that engagement is an ongoing process, not a one-time fix. It's something you have to continuously work at and adapt to the ever-changing needs of your workforce.
That's a great point. And I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into the State of People Strategy Report.
We have. And there's still so much more to explore.
We've talked about the challenges and opportunities facing HR, the role of AI in the future of work, the importance of DEIB, and the quest for employee engagement.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
But I think the key takeaway is that HR is at a really pivotal point right now.
It's a time of great change and uncertainty, but it's also a time of incredible opportunity.
And the decisions that HR leaders make today will have a profound impact on the future of work.
I think that's a great note to end on. Yeah, feels like we're standing at this fork in the road. One path leads to AI taking over everything the other. Well, I think we get to decide what that looks like.
I like that. So how do we make sure it's the path where AI makes work better for everyone, not just replaces them?
Honestly, I think it starts with a change in how we think about AI. Instead of being afraid of it, what if we saw it as this huge opportunity
To do what?
to get rid of those boring, repetitive tasks, to really dig into what makes people tick at work, and to create a work experience that's actually engaging for each person?
So kind of like AI boosting our strengths and helping us where we're weak.
That's the idea. Imagine AI helping you discover talents you didn't even know you had,
Or giving you personalized coaching, like having your own AI mentor.
and connecting you with people who have the same passions. That'd be amazing.
Sounds like a future where AI helps people build the careers they actually want, not just the ones they settle for.
That's the kind of future I want to be part of, where AI is working for us, not the other way around.
It's a great vision, but how do we actually get there? How do we make sure AI is a force for good, for everyone?
Well, I got to start with education, right? The more we all understand what AI is, what it can and can't do, the better we can shape how it's used.
Knowledge is power, especially with something as powerful as AI.
Absolutely. And we need to be talking about this stuff openly. All the ethical questions, the potential benefits, and the risks.
Like a big open conversation about the future we want to build, not just letting AI happen to us.
Exactly. And we got to push for AI that's developed responsibly. That means demanding transparency from the companies building it.
No more black boxes. We need to know what data they're using, how these algorithms are making decisions.
Right. And push for laws that protect our privacy, prevent bias. We need to support the research that's looking into the ethics of all this.
It's about being active, involved, not just sitting back and letting things happen.
If we want a good future with AI, we got to make it a good future. Now, shifting gears a bit.
Sure.
This report had some worrying stuff about DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. We talked about how it's not being prioritized as much.
Only 15% of HR teams said it was a key focus, yeah.
And that has consequences, big ones. When companies don't care about DEIB, they create workplaces that are unfair, sure.
But you're saying it goes beyond that.
Way beyond. These workplaces are actually less productive, less innovative, too.
So it's not just about doing what's right ethically, it's about what's good for business as well.
Tons of studies have shown that diverse teams, inclusive teams, they just perform better. More perspectives, more experiences, better ideas.
And that leads to better problem solving, more creativity, a wider customer base. Makes sense.
Ignoring DEIB, it's not just bad morally, it's bad strategy. But even bigger than that,
What do you mean?
there are social consequences too. When we don't build workplaces where everyone feels welcome, we're keeping those old inequalities going.
We're limiting opportunities for people who've already been held back for way too long.
It's about making a world where everyone has a fair shot, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Absolutely. And you made a good point earlier. It's not just about hitting some diversity quota.
Nope, it's got to be deeper than that. It's about creating a culture of belonging where everyone feels valued, respected, can be themselves at work.
It's about creating an environment where everyone can thrive, contribute their best.
And that takes real work. It's not just putting up a poster or having one diversity training. It's got to be baked into everything the company does.
So how do we do that? Give us some actionable steps here.
Well, number one, leadership has to actually care, like really care. They got to set the tone, make DEIB part of the company's values.
Walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Exactly. And companies need to invest resources, money, staff, time, all of it. Put those resources into DEIB initiatives.
Training, mentorship programs, things like that.
All of that. And don't just assume it's working. You got to track your progress, set goals, measure your outcomes, and be honest about what's working and what isn't.
Make DEIB part of the company's DNA, not just a side project.
Exactly. And remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Building a truly inclusive workplace, it takes time. It takes constant effort, a willingness to learn and adapt.
We've talked a lot about the ideal, but the reality is that many companies struggle with this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It's tough.
We talked about that gap between knowing engagement is important and actually making it happen.
Yeah.
Why do you think companies struggle so much with this?
I think a big part of it is they still see engagement as this soft skill, you know?
Something that's nice to have, but not essential.
Exactly. They don't get that it's not just about keeping employees happy. It's about creating an environment where they feel motivated, productive, really committed to what the company's trying to do.
It's about unleashing the power of your workforce, right?
Absolutely. When employees are engaged, everybody wins. Productivity goes up, customers are happier, people stick around longer. It's good for the bottom line.
So how do we change that perception? How do we get companies to see engagement as a key to their success, not just some fluffy extra?
We hit them with the data. Measure engagement levels, track how they change over time.
Show them the numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And connect those numbers to the stuff that really matters to the business. Show how engagement impacts productivity, customer satisfaction, the bottom line.
Make it a business case they can't ignore. But data isn't everything, right?
You got it. You also need to hear what employees are actually saying. Surveys are good, focus
Ground
groups,
ones.
all of it. Find out what gets them excited to come to work, what challenges they're facing, what they need to feel more connected to the work itself.
Go beyond the numbers. Really understand what makes people tick.
Once you have that info, then you can start making changes that really matter. Redesign jobs so they're more meaningful, offer more opportunities for growth, professional development.
Or just create a work environment where people feel appreciated, respected, supported.
It's about showing them that you care, you value them, and you're invested in their success.
And when employees feel that way, they're much more likely to be engaged and committed to their work.
It's a win-win for everyone.
This all makes me think about the role of technology, especially with all this talk about AI transforming HR. But there's also that anxiety about AI replacing jobs.
It's a big question mark hanging over everything. How do we make sure technology, especially AI, is used in a way that helps both companies and employees? It's a big one. And it's getting bigger every day as AI gets more and more sophisticated.
So how do we strike that balance? How do we make sure AI is used ethically and responsibly, especially when it comes to something as human-centered as HR?
The first thing, and I can't stress this enough, is transparency. Companies need to be upfront with employees about how they're using AI.
What data they're collecting, how they're using it to make decisions.
All of it. No more hiding AI in a black box. People deserve to understand how these systems work, what their limitations are.
No more secrets. Employees need to be in the loop.
Exactly. And involve them in the process. Get their input on how AI can be used to actually make their work lives better. Take their concerns seriously.
Make them partners in this whole AI journey, not just subjects of it.
100%. And we have to be super careful about bias. AI algorithms, they can actually make existing inequalities worse if we're not careful.
So we can't just blindly trust these systems. We need to make sure they're designed and used fairly, that they're not reinforcing the biases we're trying to eliminate.
You got it. AI is a powerful tool, but like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It's on us as humans to decide which way it goes. Now, before we get too far down the AI rabbit hole,
Sure.
I want to bring it back to something that keeps coming up. The relationship between HR and managers. This report really hammers home how important that partnership is.
But it also suggests that a lot of HR teams are struggling to really meet their managers' needs.
It's true, and I think there are a few reasons for that disconnect. One is just the sheer amount of pressure HR is under these days.
They're constantly being asked to do more with less, juggling a million priorities, trying to keep up with a world that's changing faster than ever.
It's like they're running on a treadmill that never stops.
And when you're in that kind of survival mode, it's hard to prioritize relationship building.
It is, and I think that leads to the second reason, which is a lack of communication.
Oh,
There's often this gap between what HR thinks managers need and what managers actually need.
so they might be focusing on the wrong things.
Sometimes. Like, HR might assume managers need more training on specific HR processes or policies.
When what they really need is help developing their leadership skills.
Exactly. Or maybe they need support navigating difficult conversations or creating a more engaging and inclusive team environment.
So it's about understanding the real day-to-day challenges that managers are facing.
And providing the right kind of support, not just assuming you know what's best.
It's about having those open, honest conversations with managers, really listening to what they have to say.
And that's how you build trust and create a true partnership.
So how can HR bridge that gap? How can they create more effective, more collaborative partnerships with managers?
I think it starts with a fundamental shift in perspective. Moving away from seeing managers as clients or customers and seeing them as true partners in this work.
So less transactional, more collaborative.
Exactly. And that means involving managers in the design and implementation of HR initiatives right from the start.
Get their input, value their feedback.
Make them feel like they're part of the solution, not just recipients of it.
Empower them to be active participants in shaping the workplace.
Exactly. And then it's about giving managers the tools and resources they need to be successful, whether it's training on things like coaching and giving feedback, or providing them with resources on things like conflict resolution, or creating a more inclusive work environment.
Give them the skills and knowledge they need to excel at the people side of their jobs.
And let's not forget the power of appreciation. Acknowledge and reward managers for their hard work and dedication.
A little appreciation can go a long way, especially these days when everyone's feeling stretched thin.
It can. And I think that brings us full circle back to something we talked about earlier, the role of AI in the future of work. This report makes it clear that AI is rapidly changing the HR landscape, but it also stresses that the human element is more important than ever.
It's not about humans versus machines. It's about finding that balance, that synergy where they work together to create something better.
That's exactly it. And I think HR has a crucial role to play in making sure that happens.
How so?
Well, HR professionals are uniquely positioned to be that bridge between technology and people.
They understand both the potential of AI and the needs of the workforce.
Exactly. They can advocate for the ethical use of AI, foster a culture of trust and transparency around its use, and make sure that ultimately AI is used to enhance human potential, not replace it.
And the big challenge, but also an exciting opportunity for HR to really step up and shape the future of work.
It is. It's a chance for HR to become true strategic partners within their organizations, driving innovation, creating a more human-centric workplace, and helping to build a future where technology is used to empower people, not replace them.
And where everyone has the opportunity to thrive and reach their full potential.
That's the dream, isn't it?
It is. And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I want to bring our focus back to one last insight from this report. We talked about the decline in DEIB prioritization, particularly in the U.S., but we also noted that European HR leaders seem to be much more focused on DEIB,
It's a pretty stark contrast.
even though they're facing many of the same challenges as their U.S. counterparts. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think is driving this transatlantic DEIB gap?
It's complicated, no easy answer. But I think part of it comes down to different cultures, different values, even different laws.
You mean like how Europe often has stronger social safety nets and more regulations around things like worker protections?
That's part of it. In a lot of European countries, there's this deeper sense of social responsibility, a greater awareness of the inequalities that have been baked into their systems for centuries.
So they're more sensitive to those issues, more proactive about addressing them.
And that's reflected in their laws, too. Many European countries have stronger legal protections for diversity and inclusion in the workplace.
While in the U.S., there's often more of a focus on individual meritocracy and less government intervention in business.
It's a different approach, for
Yeah.
sure. And it shows up in how companies recruit and hire, how they promote and develop their employees.
So in Europe, you might see more emphasis on things like setting targets for representation or using blind recruitment processes to reduce bias.
While in the US, the focus might be more on responding to discrimination complaints after they happen.
It's like a completely different mindset.
It is, and it's something that companies operating globally need to be aware of. What works in one culture might not work in another, so you have to adapt your DEIB strategies accordingly.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution. It takes a nuanced understanding of the specific context you're operating in.
Exactly. And most importantly, it takes a real, genuine commitment to creating a more equitable and inclusive workplace for everyone. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it makes your company stronger and more successful in the long run.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up this second part of our deep dive.
Agree.
We've covered so much ground, from the potential of AI to the importance of DEIB to the challenges and opportunities facing HR in this rapidly changing world of work.
It's a lot to take in, but I hope our listeners are feeling energized and inspired to tackle these challenges head on.
I hope so too, because the future of work is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play in making sure it's a future where everyone can thrive.
Yeah, it feels like we're at this point where everyone's trying to figure out how to make those two things work together.
It's not an either-or situation, right? It's not humans or machines. It's about finding that sweet spot where they complement each other.
Where AI can take care of the stuff that's, frankly, kind of boring for humans and free us up to focus on the stuff we're really good at.
Like creativity, problem solving, building relationships.
Exactly. Making work more human, not less.
And I think HR is in a really unique position to make that happen. They're the ones who understand both the potential of technology and the needs of people.
They can be the bridge between those two worlds. Right. They can push for AI that's used ethically, make sure everyone understands how it's being used.
No more black boxes.
Exactly. And ultimately, make sure AI is helping people reach their full potential, not holding them back.
That's a powerful vision for the future of HR.
It is. It's a chance for HR to really step up, be those strategic partners, those champions for a more human-centric workplace.
And that brings us back to one last point from this report. We talked about how DEIB seems to be slipping down the priority list, especially in the US.
Yeah, it kind of makes you scratch your head, doesn't it?
Because the report also highlighted that European HR leaders are way more focused on DEIB, even though they're dealing with a lot of the same challenges as their American counterparts.
Big difference there. So what's going on? Why do you think there's such a gap between how Europe and the US approach DEIB?
I have some theories, but I'm really curious to hear your take on it.
Well, I think part of it comes down to those deep-seated cultural differences we were talking about earlier.
Different values, different historical contexts.
Exactly. In a lot of European countries, there's this strong sense of social responsibility, a recognition that they need to actively address the inequalities that have been built into their systems over time.
And that's reflected in their laws, too. A lot of European countries have really strong legal protections when it comes to diversity and inclusion in the workplace.
Right, they're not messing around. And that creates a different environment for businesses.
Makes sense. While in the U.S., the focus is often more on individual responsibility, less government intervention in business.
Different approach, for sure. And it plays out in how companies do everything from hiring to promotions.
So in Europe, you might see companies setting specific targets for representation or using blind recruitment processes to try and reduce bias.
While in the US, companies might be more focused on reacting to discrimination complaints after the fact.
It's like they're playing defense instead of offense.
Kind of. And that's something that companies operating globally need to be really mindful of. What works in one culture might not fly in another.
You got to be adaptable.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, it comes down to commitment. A real, genuine commitment to creating a workplace where everyone feels like they belong.
Not just because it's the law, but because it's the right thing to do and because it makes your company stronger.
Well said. Well, it feels like we've reached the end of our deep dive into the State of People strategy report.
We have. And wow, we covered a lot.
We did. AI, DEIB, engagement, the evolving role of HR, it's all connected.
It really is. And I think the big takeaway here is that HR is at this incredibly important crossroads right now.
The decisions they make today are going to shape the future of work for all of us.
It's a huge responsibility, but also a huge opportunity.
Couldn't agree more. It's a chance to build a future where work is more human, more equitable, more fulfilling for everyone.
To all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought, some inspiration to go out there and make work better for yourselves and everyone around you.
Keep those ideas coming, keep challenging the status quo, and let's build that future together.
And that's a wrap.